This is wide open. You can say whatever you want.
Okay.
We just try to keep it.
YouTube. There's certain V words, election words.
I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I am not. That is not part of my reality, other than for information to wake people up, which is what you do.
Yep.
We got David Icke coming on first part of January.
Sweet.
And a few other shows around there. Maybe we can get together again in January if you're available.
Anytime, Todd.
Yeah, because the goal here, we are live. And that's the thing about this show. It's not a Q&A. I mean, it is, because there's somebody coming on that we're not familiar with, and I'm going to ask questions. But no different than if we're having a cup of coffee or drinking a beer. We're just having you write books, and then we just start talking.
Yep.
And normally, 2,500 episodes, it goes like a conversation. Every now and then, I have one recently where somebody, kind of has their own agenda and mindset, and that's okay. I can adapt. But really, what I was getting at is our goal this year. One of my goals this year is to merge what we call the light worker or starseed platforms with the conspiracy platforms and the disclosure platforms. And I'm not, those connotations, those labels, I'm taking nothing away from anybody. I'm just identifying to the best of my ability these segments that all have certain attributes, but we all have a common attribute, and that is to wake the hell up, which is what you, David Icke, and so many others, Laura Eisenhower, so many others have provided information over the years for us to wake up. It's such an important part of the personal enlightenment journey. And so I think that's a huge factor. And then as you got into this book in the third dimension, in the dimensions, the part where you have you go see, we'll talk about this in a minute, secrets, cosmos, and utopia.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I admire about what you've written and what you write, is that it isn't just about the problem. It isn't just about, hey, there's some funky stuff going on, and truth is stranger than fiction, and it just a bunch of running up the red flag. There's also hey, what can we do with this? Who are we? What are we? And so that's where I'd like to see it go this year. Hello, Ashley Lee. She was in Sedona with us. She's on right now. I don't know if you can see those comments. It's a comment from all the platforms on the right-hand side. I'm going to play the intro real quick, and for everybody who's here already on the live and replay, this is Brad Olson. He's got an extraordinary story. We had a conversation in Sedona in the Vibrational Empowerment Network studios when we were doing 4 or 5 a day over there. And this guy has an incredible story. He's recently been on Ancient Aliens, Project Camelot. I think I saw you on Laura's show. I mean, and you've been traveling the world, quite a story since you were very young, and just been following the guidance and writing books. So we appreciate you coming in, sharing space with us, and honoring us with your presence. We're going to be right back in just 1 second. We're going to just play the intro real quick. How's it going, everybody? Happy New Year to you too. It is New Year's Eve, at least in the U.S. And what a pleasure it's to sit down with Brad Olson. We met in Sedona, and he's been traveling the world since he was a very young adult, following his guidance. Been all over the place. Been to some very holy and whole places, and he carries that kind of that free spirit, SOULOGY energy. He follows his own beat, and he's serving himself, serving his brothers and sisters, and serving humanity all in one stroke equally. And that is the Trinity energy. So welcome back, Brad. I look forward to sitting down with you for this next hour and a half. See how long I can keep you here. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and for everything you do.
Oh, hey, Todd. It's always great to see you. And now we're doing it virtually. Last time we were face to face, but feel like you're a soul brother, and really glad to be back with you.
Right on. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Brad, I would suggest you check him out a little bit. You can find him some interviews on YouTube, and we'll get into at the end of the show where you can find him more directly or wherever he has his stuff online. But in September, I was in Sedona. We rocked it over there for a while, and he gave me a copy of his second to the last book, Future Esoteric. Dear Todd, thank you for having me on the show in Sedona, your brother Brad, and thank you for that, Brad. So first of all, he's written quite a few books. 1997, Extreme Adventures in Hawaii. 1997, Extreme Adventures in Northern California, where I believe you're from. In 1999, In Search of Adventure, a wild travel anthology. 2001, World Stompers, a global travel manifesto. 2004, Sacred Places Around the World, 108 destinations. And Sacred Places in Europe, 2007. Sacred Places North America, 2008. All have 108 destinations. And then in 2014, he wrote Modern Esoteric, which I believe was the first of a triad of three. The second one is what he gave me, Future Esoteric. And then the last one is, what is it? Beyond Esoteric. Yeah. So I used to read from the age of about 21 or 22, probably for about 20 years. I read 2-3 books a week and had quite an extensive library. This is all, of course, pre-internet. I didn't really have a lot of access to internet even into my early 40s. And I'm also a writer. I write some poetry. I write some lyrical stuff, music based, but also like to write. Period. I've never written a full book. Well, not a long one anyway. And so I'm really into writing style as well. So it isn't just your content that I'm attracted to, but it's also the way you write. And one of the things that I liked about this book is Future Esoteric. So when you look into the index of the book, instead of the typical chapters and all that, he has the front matter, the back matter, which is the intro and the conclusion, and then he has it broken up into dimensions. And so each one of these dimensions is labeled. One's called Secrets, one's called Cosmos, and one's called Utopia. And you can kind of see where he's going with it, as in what's going on, where it's at, and there's a new one. So that's Beyond Esoteric. You get it broke up the same way.
It's all three are formatted the same way, 3 sections, and they could have been really, you see how thick that book is. This one's 480 pages. I could have made it 9 books, actually. Each section could have been its own book, but I like to condense the information in there and keep it in a congruent pattern with the next books.
Right on. So when we were in Sedona, I don't even remember how many. I know it was about 3 weeks of, I think we probably did something like 60 shows. I don't remember. It was about 75 hours of programming. And we did not utilize our typical distribution method in terms of the multi-platforms. We were going through vibrational empowerment, networks, stream, and just sharing it basically on one of our pages, which that page, by the way, grew incredibly during that time. It grew like from, I think, 17,000 to 22,000 following it just in a matter of 3 weeks. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people in our community, which is a pretty good sized community and a community that kind of overlaps with other communities like contemporary groups and that type of thing, might not be that familiar with you. I was a little bit taken aback that I hadn't heard of you, at least that I could recall when I met you, because of the amount of ground that you've traveled in the etherics and on the physical plane of the earth. So just real quickly, because I want to jump into these books, and I don't want to press you for too much time because I know you're going to see your sweetheart. But could you just give us a little quick intro into how this all started? Because it's an extraordinary story. If I remember correctly, you were, I want to say 18, 19, 20, and you went, I don't know, you reached a choice point and you just started traveling and it never stopped.
That's pretty much it. Well, I'll pick it up from there. Right out of college. Yeah.
Right on.
Literally the summer out of graduating from Illinois State University. I grew up in Chicago area.
Okay.
I was struck with the travel bug, let's say, being in Boy Scouts and having traveled all around the Midwest and a couple other states in the U.S. I just wanted to get out and see the world. So while all my other business college comrades were all going to get interviews and try to get a job right at I'm playing hacky sack in the quad, being like, well, what's the hurry? You know, why not at least take a year off and travel and do something cool? So a few people wanted to come with me to Europe 3 months and thought that'd be great, but one by one they all dropped out. So I went solo. And in the second week into my trip, this is how it's so interesting, Todd, because you take a life journey and something could happen and then you'd be off onto another track so easily. In the second week of the trip, my backpack got stolen. I lost everything except for my money belt and passport. And at that point, I decided I'm just going to travel on and do my trip. Bought a few things I needed, traveled very light. And all the while, I thought, wow, I'm doing so great. I'm backpacking around the world. I self-financed my trip, around Europe. And then I'd meet these Australians and and they'd be like, 3 months, mate. We've been on the road for 3 years. How'd you do that? So we work our way around the world one way, we keep going. Wow. So I was like, wow, that's great. And that instilled in me that I wanted to do a trip similar to this. Basically, my entire 20s, I was traveling, and I eventually went out to Japan. I taught English for 14 months. And when I finished my contract, I started up again. So I was out of the country for 3 years in my late 20s. And then when I finally got back, I moved to California permanently and started this warehouse called the CCC. And that's when I started my publishing business in 1995.
What's the warehouse? What kind of business is the warehouse?
Well, it was an artist space with a bunch of people that I met traveling in India. Okay. And so we were throwing these parties in the warehouse, which was really fun at the time. And then that parlayed into this other event that I still do, except for this year of COVID, called the How Weird Street Fair, which is a direct outflow of what we were doing at the CCC in San Francisco. And now it's a 30,000 person street fair event.
Holy crap.
Yeah, it's huge. So
you got to let me know when the next one's coming, because I'm coming to see it.
Yeah. Well, if we ever are
I'd rather come at 59 than at 19 or 29, because I probably wouldn't have made it back.
Yeah. Well, if you've heard of Burning Man, it's quite similar to like a day at Burning Man with 13.
Are you in the Bay Area, or are you north?
I am in the Bay Area, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say, because that area, which I've passed through before, but I've never really, I've traveled around the country quite a bit, but I've never really like jumped into the culture, but obviously read about a lot about it. But I just know that area is really hot in terms of progressiveness and in terms of open-mindedness and forward thinking. Yeah,
that is true.
So you're probably one of the seeds that germinated there in the 60s and 70s and 80s too.
Not quite. I was born in Chicago, but I came out here in my early 20s and then settled in my late 20s. Been here ever since.
So, I'm really happy because I like to keep things spontaneous. I never prepare, but I did do some reading which I don't do reading anymore. But I went through this, and it's a very easy read. First of all, in fact, I do have I think a similarity with you both on the way I write and also in this show, which is when you're reading your book, it's like you're right there sitting there, you know, across the coffee table from Brad, listening to him tell stories. It's a very conversational type of writing. Is that just something that occurred naturally, or is that something you consciously try to do?
Yeah, it's funny. Carrie asked me this. Carrie Cassidy asked me this. Is like, how'd you get into this? And I said, well, I've always been a really good storyteller, and I was the funniest person in our family. In fact, some jokes that I cracked as a kid, like even as a toddler, still make my family laugh. So talking about the old times. So I've always been a very good storyteller. And when people ask me, oh, I want to get into writing and how do I do it? I always say, well, first of all, if you can sit around a fire with a bunch of your friends and tell a good story for 10 minutes and don't say like, and don't say and don't say you know, and think through your thoughts, be very precise with your words, you're halfway there. It's the step of being a good writer is a good speaker. And then that's probably why I've adapted to the conference circuit so well. And I've been speaking at conferences for a few years now, and I really like that. I find I can hold an audience and occasionally crack a joke and spin a good yarn, but also deliver very factual and need to know information. So the whole nature of esoteric is that this is information that has been withheld from humanity. And now as we are entering the Great Awakening, it's all coming out. It's all there for everybody to absorb if they want to. But if you don't want to, it's like taking a horse to water. You can bring it there, but you can't make it drink. So that's why I offer these books. And I understand they're for a select few. That's the nature of the word esoteric. When everybody knows this material, then the word changes to exoteric. So it's kind of interesting that while we're in the process of understanding this stuff, it is something that takes on a new life of its own. So the more of us that start grokking this information, the faster the transformation is going to be.
Agreed. And I want to just preface from this point forward. I know I'm very familiar, of course, with Project Camelot, of course, and some of the other platforms you've been on. I keep an eye on all of the platforms in these areas that I was talking about: disclosure, conspiracy, lightworker, starseed, whatever, just to get ideas and pick up on nuances and just to see what information and codes out there. But this audience that is listening now and that will listen on the replay, this is an audience that shares so much with you. Okay. I know from talking to you prior that we all kind of had like a reawakening experience. Yours was much more seamless and fluid. And because of the way that you've traveled and everything and what you do, I got to think you must have come out of a whirling dervish Sufi life or some type of adept life prior to this one and went right into the one that you're in now and just picked up where you left off. But this audience, for the most part, has had awakening experience on an individual level, has been estranged, from family, friends, normalcy, because they've been following their own guidance. They, in an energetic sense and sometimes a literal sense, have followed the same path you have, both in terms of what you pursued and also the geographical moving around and all that stuff. And of course, the research. And so this is a community that recognizes what's going on. They may not have all the details that you have in these incredible books, but they're familiar with enough to know that truth is stranger than fiction and something's going on and we've been duped, we've been lied to, and what the hell is this? But it's also a community that's saying, okay, this is what happened. Circumstances and consequences are basically the same thing at this point, because I am soul, because I am made in the image, or I am supernatural, as you cite later in this book that I read through. And where are we at and where we're going, or where are we at and where are we going? Because we know it's collaborative, we know it's a co-creative effort. And this is what I love about this book. I haven't seen the other one, but I know the structure, like down that you're saying, use that 3-3-3 structure.
Yep.
Got to be the same. So this is what's going on. You talk about it kind of like, here's how we got here. Here's where we are. Here's where we can go. Have you gone through? I get the feeling that you've gone through this process that we share with you. And can you just kind of give us a little bit of history on that? Like, it sounds like in these early books you were talking about the areas, and then you started getting into these sacred spaces, which I remember you telling me that you were traveling around and all of a sudden you were in this place, and I can't think of the example you gave me at the time of the examples, and you found yourself in a holy environment, and then things started happening. Was there a time and a place or a period or a year where your intuition kicked in and said, whoa, I'm in the pyramid, I'm in this holy place, something's talking to me, something's going on here? And did that spur you into the research that came out of these later books? How did that all happen?
Yeah, it actually really did. I can't say enough for how traveling has changed my life. It's been a secondary master's degree, really, in what's going on in Earth. I've been to all 7 continents, including Antarctica, 2 years ago. And that's a whole other story, another presentation I do, all the hidden anomalies of Antarctica. Yeah. But to answer your question, so I grew up with parents who basically dropped out of religion, mom Catholic, dad Lutheran, and they're just like, well, let the kids figure it out themselves. So essentially atheists. But the first time I backpacked in Europe, I went to the city of Pompeii in Italy, and Todd, I knew my way around. I'd been there before. So it started to instill in me the idea that, like the bumper sticker says, we're not humans having a spiritual experience, we're spirits having the human experience. That I've been around before. And this has happened to me countless other times since then. But the pinnacle was then several years later when I went to Egypt. And we talked about this first time we met. And I climbed to the top of the Great Pyramid, which is illegal unless you have a lot of backsheesh to pay the guards. Call it a youthful indiscretion. Right?
That's another attribute that we share with you. There's a lot of rebels in the crowd.
So while I was teaching English in Japan, my very beloved grandfather passed away, and I felt very sad and guilty in a way that I couldn't make it back for his funeral. By the time I finally knew that he had passed, it was the day of the funeral, so literally impossible to get back. So I was kind of carrying this burden with me for the next year and a half while I finished my contract in Japan and started out on my 19-month trip around the world. And I'll tell you, I went in one direction and ended up back home. So I don't know about this flat Earth theory. Plus, I've been up and down to the longitude lines, to the Antarctic Circle, all the way up to the pretty frigid north. But anyway, so I had this transformative experience on the top of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and I was just kind of meditating, looking out. It's such a beautiful view up there, especially at night on a full moon in March 1993.
Wow.
The lights of Cairo and the Nile River extending down, and then the darkness of the Sahara on the other side. Just a memory I'll never forget. Wow. And so I'm just up there meditating, and Pa, as we called my grandfather, came to mind. I thought, Pa, I'm really sorry I missed your funeral. And he came to me in that moment and said, Brad, look at you. Look at what you're doing. You're sitting on the top of the Great Pyramid. You're living your dream. Don't worry about missing my funeral. You are just so impressed by what you're able to accomplish here. And so from that moment on, I do believe this was a very transformative moment in my life, that finally at that moment, I was willing to say, I'm spiritual. I know this is real. Because even when I tell this story now, years later, I get goosebumps and that feeling like, wow,
I can
there's
feel
something
it.
very energetically charged.
I can feel it. Yeah. As you were describing that, setting, I'd never really thought about it, but it reminded me of The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho's book. At some point, the main character is in that same area. I don't think he's at the top of the pyramid, but that whole landscape just kind of came to life. Yeah. Let me ask you real quick. I should have asked you beforehand. Can you hang on for another hour?
Let's do it.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go an hour and a half. There's so much stuff that we could talk about, and I want to try to be as as thorough as possible. But we might have to fast track a little bit, especially through the first book, because I want to get into the second book.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that this second book is an extension. Obviously, it's a series, and so I think it'll probably flow pretty good. But let's start with this. I think there's a lot of people, especially now that we've come to the end of 2020 and we're going into 2021, even in the light worker communities, and I would have to say the same goes for the conspiracy disclosure communities. And again, these are just labels that are futile to describe the energy of transformation and people that are curious and people that are truthers, but there seems to be some division, whether it be, hey, QAnon is the only way to go, and if you're against it, you're asleep, or the elections were a fraud, or they're not, or the vaccine, or the quarantine, or the COVID, or all this stuff, right? Which is really just the outer edge of the distortion wave. Let's put it that way. Not that there's not truth to it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's the same thing playing over and over again. There's a lot of suggestive programming by the power of suggestion that comes from the powerless powers that be. But just to go into a short history, just to kind of cover from the recent past, where we can look at a lot of information that's on social media, that's on the internet, if somebody wants to do their research, to kind of follow the yellow brick road, okay? Follow, they talk about, if you want to find out what's going on, follow the money, or whatever equation that you use, whatever technique you use. In this book, the one that you gave me, Future Esoteric, in the first dimension, the first section is Secrets No More. The second one,
low energy dimension there. Yeah. We raise it up each dimension we go.
That's right. Yeah. The second one is the Fourth Reich in America.
Right.
Okay. And I in my own research years ago, to me, that's where I kind of started. I mean, I looked at stuff before that. I looked at Jekyll Island. I looked at the Federal Reserve. I looked at the Rothschilds' involvement back into the 1700s. All that stuff. But in the recent history, with names that we actually saw these people living and breathing on television, newspapers, and so on, like as an example, the Bush family. Okay, from World War II forward, it's pretty easy to follow the bouncing ball, isn't it? I mean, I kind of have two questions. One, is it pretty easy? Is that information pretty accessible to even someone who's a beginner in researching from World War II forward, particularly with the Nazi surge, or whatever you want to call it, or force, or energetics, or entity, or whatever you want to call it? And secondly, in terms of let's just start there. How much information can we get from World War II forward, particularly from the Nazi movements and those that countered?
Sure. Well, just a little context on how I was able to collect the information in all these books. And we're talking 1,400 pages between the three of them, and they're densely packed. I mean, I don't mince words, and I don't repeat myself either. So there was a period, let's just take ourselves back to the mid-1990s when the internet came out. Of course, it was very primitive back then, and you and I are a little bit old enough to remember that, rotary phones and things like that before cell phones. But then there was this golden age of the internet. I'll preface it by saying around 2005 until probably 2020. I think it's over now. But there was a good 15 years where you could research just about everything. And a lot of this information started becoming available for the very first time. And this is information about what really happened after World War II. And do believe that Hitler did not die in the bunker. He got on a U-boat and went to Argentina, along with his money man, Martin Bormann. And you have it there in Future Esoteric in the Fourth Reich in America chapter. And I have a lot more information in Beyond Esoteric, especially their base in Antarctica, as well as where they went in South America. Now, keep in mind, Fourth Reich in America is also the Americas, not just here in the U.S., but also in South America. and by extension, Antarctica. And I know exactly where the New Berlin base was. It's called Base 211. And I would love to go back there with a film crew someday and try to discover it. But travel in Antarctica is very difficult, and not many trips are going down right now. But to answer your question about this history that we're not told as far as World War II goes and the escaping Nazis, well, many of them came to this country under Project Paperclip.
Yeah.
And we had the newly developed CIA with brought over Nazis.
That's right.
Not only in the CIA, but then also with NASA, Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberich. And then you also have the MK Ultra psychiatrists that came over here as well. And I have a whole chapter in Beyond Esoteric called MK Ultra about what they were doing and how they infiltrated and started to manipulate the minds of Americans through these PSYOPs, psychological operations, which continue to this day. They were able to infiltrate our media, and it was known during the church hearings in the 1970s that the CIA had put plants into all of our major media operations since the 1950s. And they have not gone away.
Project Mockingbird, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And they have not gone away, and they continue to work on this false narrative that they continually project upon us, because they know that we're free thinking, we have free will, and they also know that if we believe this groupthink, so if all the networks are playing the same story, and then you and I go to the water cooler at work the next day and we just regurgitate what they say, well, guess what? Our free will is now buying into this false matrix, this false narrative. Well, that's all starting to crumble down. And just to kind of put a end bookcase on the Nazi stuff, well, I found there are huge tracts of land that were bought up right before World War II and right after. Some of them are so big, Todd, they're as large as some of our small states like Delaware or Rhode Island. Just massive. They're their own city-states down there. And that's where a lot of the technology went to.
Now, are you talking about South America? Or?
Correct. Chile and Argentina in particular.
I got you. Yeah. I've actually seen, and I'm sure you have too, I've seen some video, more than one, of people, and also written accounts, where they talked about it, but actually some video where they actually have like German towns in these mountains, right? I mean,
they sure do. I've been
the architecture, the people, everything. You're walking through or driving through, say remote Argentina or Chile or whatever, and you have these people that are recalling coming into a town. Everybody's speaking German, and they're all blue-eyed and blonde hair, and the architecture, crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of them is called La Falda, right above the town Cordoba in central Argentina. There's even another mountain range a lot of people don't even know about in the middle of Argentina where this town La Falda is. And I went and took a tour of the Eden Hotel where Adolf Hitler was seen after World War II. Now, there's a great series on History Channel. I don't want to regurgitate too much, but anybody interested in this subject, check out Hunting Hitler, 3 seasons. Yeah. And a lot of these locations I went to as well. The other is San Carlos de Bariloche. Again, you're walking into a Bavarian German town, and I've been to Bavarian Germany many times and know what I'm talking about. And you just feel like, wow, here I am, and beautiful mountain scenery, just like southern Germany. And I found the location of the house, the Inalco house near Bariloche. Couldn't get down there to see it, but it's in that show called Hunting Hitler. Anybody wants to see it. Yeah. And he had a seaplane ready to go in the Chilean border within view. So you know why all these countries in South America had duly elected dictators and then they got overthrown with fascist dictators by our CIA?
Yeah.
It's because they were supporting this Fourth Reich. And it could also be looked at as a third power, one of an intelligence gathering power, not like the Cold War, but it laying us off against the Soviets the whole time, keeping us paranoid, keeping us at odds, building up an arms race, and just sort of prodding the bear and the eagle to be ready to fight each other.
Yeah.
And all the while, it's these guys behind the scenes pulling this stuff off and controlling the CIA.
And let's talk about what that's morphed into. Okay. And this is perfect. I'm glad you went into this detail. So this was a situation. Okay. So if we take Operation Paperclip, and then we take Operation High Jump, when Admiral Byrd in 46, post World War II, goes with an armada to Antarctica for experimentation or experimental research or whatever that was designated, and comes back 6 weeks later with a decimated armada and many lives lost and so on. Okay. Yeah. There's like a hiccup there. There's because the information obviously was being concealed, and we know that. And I think the importance of it is to just try to figure out, what are we dealing with out here externally? Is there really an America? Is there really a China? Is there really an India or an Israel? And what I'm getting to by that is, how could these purportedly oppositions or antagonists, the Nazis in this case, or whoever was on that side, how could they freely move around? There had to be some type of cooperation. It sounds like the CIA was basically the generator or the central place, and obviously, like you said, it was populated by Nazis, as was not NASA. Okay, but there just seems to be a lot of overlap between those forces we see as being opposed to each other, even up to this day. And if we talk about secret space, or we talk about many other things, what's behind all that, in your opinion? Like, is there one central force running everything, or are there vying factions that are jockeying for supremacy?
Right. And the old saying, journalistic saying, if you can't make sense of a story, just follow the money. And that's the case here. Once again, we went to World War II with a great loss of life, material, and it was a hard-fought battle to take Germany and Japan down. Right after the war, there was still a huge amount of anti-German sentiment in this country, rightly so, because of this great loss and sacrifice. And we knew that there were escaped Nazis. So we put together an armada of ships to go down there to confront them in Antarctica. And this was called Operation High Jump. The Battle of High Jump took place right off ashore of the base in New Schwabenland. And there were craft that came up out of the water that were not able to be shot down. They're shooting all kinds of rounds of anti-aircraft at it, couldn't even pierce it, couldn't even get close to it. It had some kind of force field around it, however we want to describe that. And as a show of force, they used a laser beam, much like a directed energy weapon. This is in 1946, mind you.
Right.
It sliced one of our destroyers in half, the USS Murdoch. A lot of this detail of this information came out from the KGB after the Cold War. You could just walk into Moscow with a suitcase full of money, and they would sell you KGB secrets. And a lot of this came out, and they've had autopsy videos of aliens, crash sites. There's more information that's come out of the old Soviet Union than has from our country. And one of these things was what really happened during Operation High Jump. And so we turned around and left. And it wasn't just America. There were other countries involved, other allied countries, and we just split 2 months into a 6-month expedition. And Admiral Byrd, he was kind of a talkative guy, maybe more than the military or politicians wanted. And he told a Chilean journalist that we are confronted with an enemy that has the ability to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. Well, Todd, as far as I know, there's nothing that's been released that could fly pole to pole at incredible speed. So clearly we're talking about some kind of very high technology that has not been discussed or released to the world, but maybe will be soon with the new Space Force.
Well, that's another thing that this comes to as well with your research. And by the way, there's a great video. I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Sepper, Sepher. He just came out with like 2 days ago called "Is There a Galactic Federation?" and he covers a lot of this information in video form. But what I wanted to ask you is, if you look at some of the basics, okay, so one would be high jump. Let's say the Battle of LA in World War II.
Yeah.
The showing of a armada of ships above the White House. I believe that was 1946 or 47.
52 actually.
52. Okay, so 52. So and then there was also, of course, Roswell in 47. Now, what I'm getting at is, that's some pretty hard evidence. There were thousands and thousands of witnesses to the Battle of LA. There was thousands of witnesses to the incident in DC. There was other prominent ones that got less press, but these are like pretty big deals. And then to have 60, 70 years of let's just say our governmental leaders saying, I don't know if there's a UFO. I don't know if there's a UFO. I don't know if there's ETs and so on. And now we've reached a point here at the tail end of 2020 where there seems to be, for the last few weeks, an acceleration of what people might call soft disclosure, right? Including that Israeli space head who came out at 87 years old and talked about that we have a base on Mars and this and that. What I'm getting at is this. In your opinion, is the Project Mockingbird approach, the infiltration of all sources of information on the face of the earth, really, not just America, is it still proliferating? Is it still perpetuating itself and expanding? And is it giving us these spoonfuls one by one of what they want us to know, and at some level are still controlling us as they're looking at an outcome 50, 60, 100 years down the road?
Well, there is, and I'm glad you brought that up, because people want to know what this is on the cover of Beyond Esoteric. This is the yellow cube, at least how I and my designer imagine it to be, this holographic generator that can look back at any event in history. There's information in Future Esoteric as well as Beyond Esoteric about what that is. But as far as creating this false matrix and this narrative, yeah, they've been doing false flags on us for a long time, but they don't work anymore because we're awakened. And this is what this global elite, who's the real enemy here, not Russia, not really other nation states. It's really this global elite, which is this octopus that has control over so many things, including money with the Federal Reserve and fiat currencies. You control the money, you control the people. And Richard Nixon said, the American people won't believe anything until they see it on television. Well, they control that too. So this is how the false matrix narrative has been created and perpetuated, to the point where they can pretty much do anything and spin any yarn on a false flag attack. And the majority of people believed past tense. Now they don't anymore. We're seeing it all unraveling right before our very eyes, with so many lies in the world right now that are just plain as day to see. Some people are on a quicker pace than others in waking up to this deception. And it is a deception on a global scale. And that's usually what throws people off, because they can't see, how could this thing be so big? How could it be global? Well, this goes back to the Nazis once again, and the propaganda minister, and Hitler himself in Mein Kampf says, you create a lie that's so big and you repeat it enough times that people will start to believe it. Okay, and that's what the false matrix is. And
it's I don't remember his name, but the propaganda minister, he actually had one. That guy actually came to the U.S. after the war and created basically the first public relations company, right? In terms of the private sector or whatever, that became huge. I read the story on it. It was huge. I don't know if it was that guy or one of his underlings, but
it was one of his underlings. He committed suicide with his family. He did die at the end of World War II.
But I mean, that thing, I think it was actually called Public Relations #1 or something like that. I don't remember, but it controlled things from like, I think there was one story where I want to say 1957, they did an ad because they'd cut a deal with the tobacco companies. And they did an ad with like several attractive women smoking cigarettes, walking down the street in New York City. And then the sales of cigarettes just went through the roof.
Yeah. I think you're speaking of Edward Bernays, and you're going to love Beyond Esoteric, because he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Wow, I didn't know.
All about knowing the ego and the superego and the id. And Edward Bernays wrote a book called Propaganda just about 100 years ago, and it is the blueprint, the owner's manual for how they're doing it today. So,
well, was it Goebbels or him or Hitler that said, "Tell a lie enough, and it will become the truth"? Which is really
so. Hitler and Goebbels.
Okay, so going back to that, like here's where I'm kind of like going, how does this octopus work, right? Is there a head? And if there's a head, and is it from another dimension? How did the Nazis get the technology and all that stuff, and the ET treaties that Eisenhower supposed? I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, but in simple terms, if everybody knows, and when I say everybody, I'm talking about, let's say, the Chinese and the Indians and the Israelis and the Americans, Britons and the French and all that. If everybody knows that the mainstream media is controlled by the head of the octopus, right? Why is it that they play the game with each other? Is it because that the head of the octopus has dirt on them, or is it out of intimidation that they do what they're supposed to do, or they get taken out?
Well, all the above. What's the one country in Europe that has not been involved in any world war? Switzerland. What's in Switzerland? The Bank of International Settlements. That is the central bank that controls all the central banks. So if you want to know where the head of the snake is, and I'll even tell you, it's a suburb of Zurich called Zug, Z-U-G. And I remember seeing about 8 years ago that the French paramilitary, which is our equivalent to the Green Beret, they had put together a plan to invade Switzerland, to go up to this very location and arrest and take out the heads of the central bankers. These are the globalists. This is where they're at. Davos, Switzerland is going to host the Great Reset next year. Yeah, probably great for them, not so great for us. And it's all about money once again. So this is, if we start seeing fireworks, something going on in Switzerland, it's called the Octagon Group, then you know that there is an attempt to take out this global elite, because that's where they're at, and that's where they've been for centuries. Did you know that Switzerland was formed right after the Knights Templar were taken out 900 years ago? Right after. Switzerland was this high country. I've been there. Caravans would cross over, but nobody ever really lived there. Not until the bankers, who the first international bankers were the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
They got taken out by the King of France and the Pope, Clement at the time, that they went underground. So their whole fleet, which was ported off of Marseille, France, disappeared. Nobody knows where they went. Some went to Scotland, which created the underground, at that time, Freemasonic Scottish Rite. Others went to America. And my friend Scott Walter, who does America Unearthed, I was on one episode with him. He's written some books about the Templars in America, and I've seen the inscriptions on the East Coast. Some of them came here, but they inspired not only Freemasonry, but our founding fathers, many of whom were Freemasons, including George Washington himself, wearing his little Masonic bib and putting the cornerstones into some of our most famous buildings in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. itself is a totally Masonic city, and I have a map of it here in Beyond Esoteric with a lot of that information. So our foundation of this country, of Western civilization, is largely based on this secret society. And they do have their secret handshake and secret oaths. And of course, Kennedy was very much opposed to that and did that speech about how we are opposed to this and we're an open free society. Lo and behold, assassinated a few weeks later.
That seemed to be a pivotal point. Now I'm talking not just particularly his assassination, but the period between, let's say, Eisenhower's in Eisenhower's 8 years, or maybe even Truman into Eisenhower, up to let's say Nixon, and of course we're talking about the more prominent assassinations. We're talking about some of the lesser known overthrows of governments. I mean, there was an expansion of the CIA, and again we go back to the head of the octopus. Okay, and I would love to hear your perspective on this. So, if all of these, let's just put them in categories of countries, okay? Countries in the Vatican, the countries of France and England and US and Japan and so on. If these are all the players on the superficial, and there's a head of the octopus behind the scenes that through intimidation or bribery, or say blackmail, is controlling these players on the board, okay? Why wouldn't, in your opinion, why wouldn't these players pull together to overthrow overtly and expose overtly this head of the octopus that you say is based in the suburb in Zurich?
Well, clearly they're controlled by it or are being blackmailed by it. They've fallen for the honeypot and gone to Epstein Island, and there were cameras everywhere. The minute you stepped on his plane to the minute you got off, and everywhere you went on his island, these were very elaborate blackmail schemes. It's been said that up to 80% of our sitting senators and congressmen have been compromised.
Yeah.
And there could be some major fireworks here in next month, January, when a lot of this stuff gets revealed. No wonder they're fighting Trump so hard to take him down, because he's got it all. And Q has said it too. Look, I follow Q like I follow a lot of different narratives. I don't see that Q has ever called for bloody insurrection. I don't see Q has ever called for anything that is other than exposing this octopus. And let's just say those tentacles of the octopus are all these things we're discussing. The control of money, pharmaceuticals, landholding corporations, so many other different things that are basically controlling the world. Here in America, the Rockefellers are one of the, let's call it like a Medusa, a multi-headed snake, right? Because it has 146 individuals basically control the vast majority of assets, resources, and money on this planet. That was a study that came out of Switzerland, and it's in that book you have, Future Esoteric, describing follow the money, and you get down to just a select few. So let's call them the global elite. They also have gone by Illuminati or Cabal, deep state in this country. Rockefeller, very prominent in here. They control pharmaceuticals and oil, another outdated mode of energy that we could have gotten done with 100 years ago with Tesla and his world system. They suppress this technology. They ruthlessly go after anybody who counters their narrative, and this also includes pharmaceuticals and the vaccines. You go to Europe, and then you have the Rothschilds. Did you know that our Federal Reserve is owned mostly by people that don't even live in this country?
Yes.
These central bankers, they run out of Switzerland. They own us. And we have to keep in mind that there is the empire of three cities. And you mentioned it, the Vatican, spiritual control. With the Jesuits, huge amount of influence and control. You have the city of London, a 1 square mile portion of London that is the bankers and the money supply. And then here in America, Washington, D.C. is a separate city state. All three are within larger countries, but they have their own laws and they have their own rules.
They're immune.
Yep, they are immune. So they're very, very clever the way they set up this whole global scheme. And now we're seeing it roll out.
Would you say, it's a two-part question, would you say in order to have that type of infrastructure, that it's likely that there was assistance from a higher level of intelligence? And the second part of the question, do you think that there is a higher level of intelligence behind this octopus that you're describing? And do you think there's a higher level of intelligence behind, let's say, the truther movement or Q or Trump or whatever you want to put, label you want to put on that?
That's a great question, Todd. And I love the old UFO researcher, one of the original ones, Bill Cooper. You may have heard of him.
Yeah, William Cooper.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that book.
He was exposing 9/11 as a false flag, and they took him out 2 months later when he said, Osama bin Laden, you send a CNN crew to his cave, and you can't send the CIA there to assassinate him. It's like, come on, this is an inside job. And he's absolutely right, and he paid the ultimate price for that. But his original, and it's a great old grainy video, you can still watch it on YouTube, when he presented to the UFO Congress in 1989. He was like saying, here's a stack of documents I got out of naval intelligence. I'm giving it to you. I don't even know if I'm going to walk out of here alive after this, but I'm here to do it in service to let everybody know. And one of his classic lines in that talk was, you put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers.
Yeah.
And that's a simplified way of saying that there are good and there are bad. We live in a dualistic planet. We live in a dualistic universe. There are malevolent ETs, which have been interacting here for a long time. And then there are benevolent ETs who basically take a standoff approach, much like the Prime Directive in Star Trek is a real cosmic law that in a developing society like ours, rapidly developing and evolving, you don't interfere directly. Now, if we were going to launch our nuclear bombs, they would interfere and take them out. We cannot destroy this planet due to the folly of war. But at the same time, you have malevolent ETs here on this planet. You notice how we've always been conditioned, oh, look to the skies. Maybe we'll get a sighting of extraterrestrials, extra outside of Earth. What about the inner terrestrials that have always been here underneath the Earth in some of these underground bases and underground cities? Some of them very, very old, like Dulce, New Mexico, and others that have...
The Phil Schneider incident over there. And there's Scott, we could talk for hours. Well, I saw a video the other day that was showing visually the depth of the ocean, right? And first of all, 99% of the volume of the surface is water, which is like mind blowing. And they were showing the depth of it. They were showing different things to prop against it, from a contrast level, like say the Titanic or a whale, and it was something like 35,000 feet below the surface. And then to consider the age of the Earth, even with what they have put forward, which we know is not true, and the presence of what I'll call star family or whatever you want to call it. And you even cited earlier about when Admiral Byrd went down to Antarctica, and these ships, which is documented, came out of the water. And it's not the first time, and it's not the last time people have cited that. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes what you're looking for is right in front of your face, isn't it?
Right in front of your face or right below your feet. That's how the reptilians and the Greys that have been in some of these, I call them legacy bases, how they get around the Prime Directive, because they too are from Earth. So they too can interact and do things like cattle mutilations, human abductions, and get away with it.
They get the permission in a deceitful way to follow as close as possible to that Prime Directive that you're talking about. Is that right?
Now we've been talking about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and they're basically cutouts. Yes, extremely important, very powerful people, but they're more like the colonels and the captains. I would say the real generals here are these raptor ETs, these Draco reptilians, which have been here for thousands of years. And here's one right on the cover of Beyond Esoteric from the Sumerians, this guy right there. Yeah. And all the grays, they're synthetic beings. They're just biological robots. They're very powerful. I mean, they have abilities we don't have. They're telepathic. And so in a way, we can't compete with them.
We've run into a couple of them over here. But let me ask you this. Let's try to go a little deeper with it. Okay, on the benevolent side, let's just say, I'm not going to get into the dark and light thing, but let's say the benevolent side is the Q movement, the truther movement, the Trump, the people behind Trump, the military, the white hats in the government, whatever that is. Okay. Why isn't it that side of this point of contention or the whatever control? Why is it that side hasn't come out and overtly said, "Hey, fuck this shit. This is what's gone on. This is what's going on, and this is where we're headed," just like in your book?
Yeah.
Why haven't they come out and said something? Are they in such a place of inferiority, power-wise or energy-wise, that they can't do it?
Well, yes, and that's part of it. We talked earlier about the flyover of DC in '52. It's now known by most of the UFO researchers in the field, those were not aliens.
Right.
It could have been backward engineered alien technology, but those are the Nazis.
That's right.
Doing that pole to pole. They came out of Antarctica and did that flyover to say, look,
don't mess with us.
We'll fly over your capital saying we can destroy you quite easily and you can't do anything about it. So basically, they had to strike a deal. And you know Laura Eisenhower, she's a good friend of mine. We've talked for countless hours about her great-grandfather, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And look, he was coming out of World War II as a hardened veteran of one of the bloodiest wars in American history, seeing how hard it was on everybody involved and knowing that these guys were still around, but they had the technology that we didn't have, you see. And this is the same deal that was struck through Eisenhower in what's known as the Greada Treaty, also called Grenada Treaty, but I've heard it mostly described as Greada. And this is every 10 years, on the fourth year of every decade, a new technology is given over to us. And our generals were just starving and hungry for all the technology it can give in exchange for allowing the ETs to do the abductions, the cattle mutes, and things like that. So we were giving them the cover. They were giving us the technology and the toys. But all the while, there was a white hat movement going. And I do believe that JFK was one of the first most visible people who was interested in routing out this deep state, this secret government. Bill Clinton even alluded to it. There's a secret government in this country and I don't have any control over it, he said to that White House reporter, Helen Thomas, I believe her name was.
Yeah.
Just like Bush Sr. said, if they ever find out what we've done, hang us from the nearest tree.
So yes, I get this. I mean, this is the information that's been out there. And thanks to people like you, especially in 2020, 2021, to put it all in this type of compilation where it's all at our fingertips and we don't have to spend hours and hours and hours, right? But I still go back to the same thing. And I'm very, very sensitive to fear-based programming, which I believe we're all susceptible to receiving and to giving. And that's not a judgment on anybody. I'm just saying we are expanding humans. We're not perfect. We're perfect imperfections. But my point is, I struggle with this. And this is a Todd thing. I struggle with, why hasn't the white hat side, why haven't they come out and said, let's pull the curtain back. It's not a big green face on the screen. It's a little old man behind the curtain. I mean, is there that much disparity between the power of what they're trying to neutralize and their own capabilities?
Well, I'd say there's three reasons why. Starting with the Nazis, post World War I, when the Vril Society started to intercede, and they were long-haired women who were very telepathic and were getting blueprints. Maria Orsich and Sigril were two of their names. I write about them in my book.
Link, right?
Right. So that gave the Germans this incredible jumpstart on technology. And so for one, then they went to you could say the dark side and allied with these malevolent ETs. And the reptilians were also helping out the Third Reich. But they were just outmanned, outpowered, and they just couldn't hold off. Hitler made a lot of military mistakes. They were very, very close to winning that war, too. But then they went to South America. They went underground and became a third power. So that was a force. So we've got the one reason is we can't go up against them because they got the better toys. They got way better technology. So I think the White Hats have just been waiting and waiting and waiting, collecting information, getting our Space Force and other military arms prepared for this conflict. Okay? Because the bad guys, they still have control of direct energy weapons, their own fleet of ships using zero-point energy and other high tech that has been withheld from us.
What about the people talk about this as a war on consciousness, and regardless of the material creations of benevolent, malevolent, physical human beings, or whatever else is out there in the physical matter existence. Consciousness is consciousness. Consciousness is perception. You've talked about how that perception has been molded, molded by the power of suggestion in one form or another. Now, what I'm getting at, wouldn't the truth, regardless of how ugly it might be, all right, wouldn't the truth be, I'm not asking a leading question, I'm sorry, I'm asking a question, would the truth being exposed to the entire 8 billion population, if that's what it is, would that not, from a level of consciousness, work in favor of what you're describing as an up-and-coming, expanding, but yet to this date still inferior force as to what it's trying to neutralize and negate? Wouldn't the information itself, away from the weapons, away from the technology, but going to consciousness itself, appealing to the people of the world and saying, this is what's been going on, and this is how we can reverse this or negate this or neutralize this by enhancing the power of yourself, something like that? Can you kind of elaborate on something like that?
Sure. Well, of course, there is a war going on behind the scenes. It's a quiet war with silent weapons, and that's what's going on, the White Hats versus the Black Hats. But as far as us, the waking, conscious masses who choose to get themselves involved with what's going on, the revolution is consciousness. The revolution is us waking up and starting to understand all this and realizing our place in the universe. And that's what's called exopolitics, how we will soon, hopefully, if we don't go to World War III and destroy this planet and everything drops out, have a seat at this galactic council and do something that takes us into this golden age. So these are like speed bumps that we just have to get over. It's going to be the dark before the light, but we're moving there. I think the light is now visible at the end of the tunnel, and we're going there. But it's like that parable of the dark night of the soul, that the hero's journey has to go through the darkest point. You see this in all the Hollywood movies, how Luke Skywalker, when you're totally defeated and there's nothing you can do, use the Force, Luke, and he hits the button at the right time and it goes down the shaft.
Papa get your spinach, right?
right. So it's translated in Hollywood movies that we have to go through this dark night of the soul to come out to the light on the other side. And that's why it's so hard for people right now. And believe me, look, 2020 kicked just about everybody's butt.
Let me ask you, I'd love to hear your answer or your thoughts on these two subjects. I'm going to just speak from the heart. I feel like I'm part of a community, and this platform represents a community that is all about finding out and expanding the power of the soul, the power of the individual made in the image, regardless of what's out there in the external, whether it's a 22-foot reptilian or anything else, that we are the power, that the only thing that's been presented to us has been distortion. It's a power, and we can call it the archons, we can call it the jinn, we can call it a lot of different things, that has the ability to distort and present, and through the power of suggestion, create through us. Basically, they're controlling our creative efforts. Now, where I'm going with this is two things. So this is the type of community that has a like-minded personal understanding. Two things. One, what are your thoughts on the possibility that there are individuals like myself, okay? And I say that for a reason, that there are individuals like myself who have consciously came here and entered a physical incarnation with an understanding and a connection to a higher level of guidance, call it counsels, call it higher self, call it whatever you want to call it, that have come down here specifically to neutralize this situation. And number two, what are your thoughts on these children coming onto the earth over the last few years who are doing extraordinary things and who are atypical of what we've had and are literally saying, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going to do this. What are your thoughts on those two things?
Well, it is a transformation moment. It is a great awakening. I do believe that most of us are coming here voluntarily. In Future Esoteric, you'll see information about the indigo children and others who have this aura that's quite different with abilities that kids didn't always have. And a lot of them are on the cusp. They'll either get it and be able to adapt to this earth, or some of them have a very, very hard time here. And that's understandable. This is a very stark, dualistic planet, in your face all the time. That's why I use the subtitle Escaping Prison Planet as a subtitle in Beyond Esoteric, because it really is like that. And many people do get stuck here as well. And it's very easy to fall into bad habits or forget your life mission. So you kind of just have to use your intuition. Every one of us has the ability to really look deep inside. I would say be in service to others, be very truthful in every action, thought, and everything you do in life. Just be transparent, honest, always tell the truth, pay your bills on time, things like that. As long as we still live in this prison planet, we still have to adapt. And I found the best way to do that is honesty is always the best policy. Just walk the walk and talk the talk, and you'll be able to manage to get through. It's not easy. We're still living in this very flawed money fiat currency system. We still have to abide by these rules and laws and wear a face mask if you go grocery shopping. And
or you don't.
Well, yeah,
or
but
you don't
get booted out. So here in California, we're in a super lockdown, so it's very hard to kind of do anything. But I think this is going to pass. We are going to come through this on the light side, and it will be a better world that we live in.
You mentioned that in this book, in from your perspective, that at minimum, many of us chose to come here. We volunteered to come here, which alludes to an existence and a life, really, or lives, that is not singular in terms of, it's all about Earth. Is this a prison planet, or is it a playground planet?
Well, it's both.
In other words,
Here's your stark reality.
Yeah. In other words, at some point, in other words, at some point, is it fair to say, regardless of what we see here, don't take it so seriously. Remember who you are. And I'm not trying to ask a leading question. I'm just trying to get an understanding of where you're coming from.
It's both. I mean, it can be the deepest, darkest, worst prison. I mean, look at all the child trafficking and things like that. You know what kind of life they've had to live so far, and they're still children. Or you can adapt to the system as we know it and be able to travel and live the life you want to live. Tomorrow I'm driving up to the Sierras to go skiing in this big storm we're going to have. And to me,
yeah, you're ballsy.
Live my life.
And that's my point, though. That's my point. Regardless of everything happening and what is a seemingly collective experience, which could very well be an illusionary holograph, right?
Right.
Can an individual, regardless of where they're at, and even beyond this, well, let's just keep it to the earth, Todd. But can an individual not bounce through life like Forrest Gump in a bubble by controlling their and fortifying their own field of energy, which is predicated by their belief system? Is it possible?
Right. Well, and just keep in mind that our belief systems have those that have traveled down through the ages, have been tried, true, and tested. And that's part of the reason we're in this prison planet, is because we've been so indoctrinated to so many of these protocols or systems or belief systems that we just feel are self-evident. Well, that's just the way it is. You're going to have to use money and earn it and pay for things if you want to live. And that's essentially true, but it does not have to be the way it is.
That's
and
right.
In the book you have, in the Utopia section of Future Esoteric, there's a whole chapter on the end of money. Hey, let's start thinking outside of the box. What if we didn't have to do that? What if we were generous enough to volunteer ourselves? That's being in service to others. If you do what you love and you love what you do, it doesn't seem like work anymore.
Yeah.
I do believe everybody has a calling and a purpose. Yeah. Hey, if you love animals, maybe you want to work with animals. If you don't mind people, volunteer to help with services. If you love just being outdoors and away from people, well, how about volunteer to work on hiking trails, things like that. There's a place for everybody. This whole model that we're seeing, both in the financial and the workplace, look, how many people are out of work right now because of COVID? I couldn't do my How Weird Street Fair this year. That's half my income and work, because somebody said we can't have large gatherings.
Right, I got you. This realm, this physical matter realm, or what we can see in the visible light spectrum, has been obviously based on extreme polarity, duality, and the accelerator for it, I guess, is fear. From your perspective, at the end of the day, we obviously have been manipulated by fear-based programming. Let's turn that around. All of these topics or forces, these powerless powers that be, these controllers that are every day losing their energetic force as we gain ours, all of those things that you've talked about, that we've contended with in this design, do they fear us awakening? Do they fear our power?
That's all they fear, really, because they are so few and we are so many. And that's really the solution to all this. As soon as we wake up, game over for them. The revolution is consciousness. It always has been, but only now are we in this empowerment movement, and that we have this internet, which is still mostly free, but that could change. One of the Rockefellers said in the 90s, when it first started out, we should have never let the internet be free. We should always kept it boxed up under national security. this is one of the ways that we're getting out there, and we're having this, you see this two-way conversation. People are in the chat room. That wasn't true with television. It was always one way. Take what we give you. This is the way it is. We're
some serious programming post-World War II through
big
television.
time. Yeah, big time.
Man, that's an hour and a half just flew by like a hot knife through butter. We'll have to do this again. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I will complete the reading of this book. I will take you up. I thought you were talking about the same book. I'll take you up on the offer on that ebook, and so I can take a look at it, and then maybe we can revisit, in 2021. Can you let us know where we can find you on social media and where we can find your books?
Sure. BradOlson.com if you want to learn more about me and the events I do, my books, other projects. CCC Publishing is my book publishing business. My books there are all readable through the Google Books app, as well as some other authors that I publish.
Is that ccpublishing.com?
3Cs Publishing, one word.com, yeah.
Okay, I'm just
and I have a YouTube channel, CCC Publishing, and Esoteric Series. All of the audiobook chapters, when I recorded them live, I put them on videos. So you can actually follow along on the audiobook for the first two books on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, the YouTube channel is under your name, right?
CCC Publishing, Esoteric Series. Yep.
Okay,
and yeah, if you want it, I'm kind of weaning myself off of social media because of the censorship.
Yeah.
But I'm on Facebook and Twitter, CCC Publishing.
Okay.
Or Brad Olson.
Yeah, that is publishing. Somebody asked, is that a publishing company? It is a publishing company.
I'm just about to go on a week-long ski trip. I'm maybe slow at responding. And hey,
well,
check out my, if you're interested in what we talked about. And the new book is out just now. And this has been my life work. I've been working on this esoteric series for over 10 years. And during this freedom period of the internet, when researching was available before shadow banning and sites went down and people just started disappearing, there was a great blossoming of information. I'm very, I feel like it was the zeitgeist of the age, and I was just in a position right then and there to take advantage of this. And
like you said, we all have a role. And you found
yes, we do.
Yes, we do. I just want to wish you a great skiing trip. Say hello to the elders, Sasquatch, whatever elementals you run into. Thanks to you and your partner, and to everything that you're doing. And thank you again for coming in and sharing space with us and opening up so honestly with us and fully, and honoring us with your presence. I look forward to many, many collaborations, and if there's anything that ever comes to mind on your end, don't hesitate to reach out.
Oh, you bet, Todd. And so wonderful talking to you again. I will shoot you over that ebook right now for you to review, and let's definitely talk again in the new year.
Right on. Sounds good. All right, y'all take care. We'll be back in 30 minutes with a beautiful divine couple. Take care.